Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from wherever you're joining us today. First, thank you for taking the time out of your very busy schedule to join us for a special web event we have featuring a deep dive into the results of a recent survey as we uncover the realities of Wi-Fi troubleshooting. I would now like to introduce today's presenter, Zeus Kerravala, the founder and principal analyst at ZK Research. ZK Research specializes in being able to see short-term trends which require tactical shifts without losing the sight of the long-term strategic direction. Prior to founding ZK Research, Zeus spent 10 years as an analyst with Yankee Group and has also held a number of senior IT roles. Today's event will be moderated by Sean Blanton, Senior Product Marketing Manager for Mojo Network. Before we get started, a little background. A recent survey was conducted by ZK Research, and Zeus uncovers the reality behind the state of Wi-Fi troubleshooting today, namely the challenges faced by Wi-Fi administrators everywhere to effectively uncover and address the issues that persist through their Wi-Fi networks. So really today's webinar is going to be Zeus sharing his findings of this survey and offering his perspective on what's really going on and what can be done about it. So without any further delay, I'll go ahead and pass the floor to our presenter, Zeus.
Thanks, Erica. Certainly appreciate the introduction. It's great to be here, and it's certainly a fascinating topic. You know, Wi-Fi has become not just the preferred connectivity method for many people today, but really the only connectivity method. When you look at all the wireless devices we carry, I mean, you project ahead to a world of Internet of Things where more and more things get connected over the Wi-Fi network. It certainly, if it's not mission critical today, it's going to be. Go ahead and flip the slide, Sean, and we'll get this thing going. I first want to take a step back, though, and look at the world through the lens of digital transformation. You know, the companies today have to operate differently. They need to think differently. If you look at the logos on the slide, they've all been highly successful in transforming their markets. And things happen today very fast, right? If you look at Walmart on the slide, they transformed retail, and they were one of the first really transformative companies. But their effect took maybe 3 decades to be felt by the other retailers. Today, Uber has a 5-year time as a market cap that's bigger than Ford or GM. Airbnb's market cap is bigger than Marriott or Hilton and Hyatt combined. Amazon is a bigger valuation than IBM, Dell, Barnes & Noble, Toys R Us, Best Buy, in fact 2x all those companies combined. So very quickly things change, and digital transformations transforming the workforce, but also the way the workers interact with customers and the way companies interact with customers, and a lot of times for retailers and schools, that's done through the network. In fact, if you look at a lot of the building blocks of digital transformation, being IoT, cloud, things like that, they're all network centric, and so the network plays a much more important role. Moving on to the next slide. Wireless today, as I mentioned before, has become the primary network for companies, and it's that way for many reasons. BYOD is mainstream, and this is a trend that I've been fascinated by. In fact, when I was, prior to being an analyst, as Erica mentioned, I had an IT role, and when I was in IT prior to Y2K, right, nobody used personal devices in the workplace, and if they did, they were considered rogue. Today, every vertical has consumer devices in it, and some of the verticals that I thought would be the most resistant to it, healthcare, financial services, the heavily regulated ones. There was news stories last year about Obama using the iPad in the White House and things. Those are the verticals that have been the most progressive with it, and those are the ones where the use of Wi-Fi becomes critically important. In fact, I was speaking with the CIO of a teaching hospital, and they've tried to implement a tablet program there, and when there's too much latency and there's too many problems with the Wi-Fi, it really creates a scenario where they have to revert back to a lot of manual paper processes, and so all the things that they're trying to accomplish go by the wayside because the wireless network's not there. So in many ways, it's the foundation of the digital enterprise. In K through 12, tablet programs have been extremely popular. they've been rampant now for the last, I don't know, 6-7 years. Some school systems are more progressive than others. And the big thing with tablet programs is schools now are finally starting to figure out that using these things isn't about just doing electronic books, right? If somebody's going to read an ebook, they might as well just read a paper book. You're not really changing the way students learn, but now you can go to more interactive learning, more immersive, things like that. So it's been big in K through 12. Higher ed, of course, the EDUCAUSE conference is going on right now, which is a higher education event, and they're looking for new ways of teaching as well. In fact, I know virtual reality, augmented reality, things like that have become increasingly popular in higher ed. I was talking with the IT administrator at one of the big schools in the southeast, and they're looking at virtual cadaver labs, and these things are being, you can even show them on, be able to follow the students on mobile devices. So again, the wireless network is mission critical today. And in fact, in some organizations, like with K through 12, if you've been following what's going on with Common Core, it's looking like that we're going to mandate more and more online testing. And in that case, if there's a problem with the network, then of course you have to give the student a retest. And so the stakes are much higher. We're able to do so much more than we have before. And I'm not trying to scare everybody here and say, oh, wireless is scary and the stakes are so high, because we're able to do things we can never do before. We can teach, we can live, we can shop, we can play in ways we never dreamed of before, but we must make troubleshooting of the Wi-Fi network easier. So moving on to the next slide. Poor performance actually means lost productivity. So here I took a shot at actually, and this is from a different survey, not the one that Eric had mentioned, but I took a shot at trying to quantify what poor performing applications actually means. And you can see here, and actually one of the things this shows is that our reliance on email is still through the roof, but that's a whole other discussion. Applications today are the lifeblood of companies, right? It's the interface to the worker, it's the interface to the customer, and poor performance is causing workers to lose about 14% productivity per year. Now, think about that. Companies spend literally billions of dollars annually trying to make workers more productive through this initiative, that initiative, whatever. But if we simply got the things that we have today working better, you could argue we would get a double-digit improvement in productivity right there. So right there, if we could just focus on improving the performance of our Wi-Fi, we would get a big boost in productivity. And so the main theme of this slide is to show that poor performing Wi-Fi will cost companies money, cause you to lose customers, damage your brand, cause problems in the educational sectors, and maybe even cause students to go to different universities. And so, something that you could almost, people think of the network as kind of a commodity, or it's the pipes or whatever. Maybe that's true, but I don't think it is. I think the network is extremely important in today's digital world, because digital transformation is network centric. Next slide. So how bad is the Wi-Fi management problem? And as Erica mentioned, that I ran a survey recently. It was done online, and it was sponsored by Mojo Networks, who's joining me on this webinar, and I'd certainly like to thank them for that. There was 102 total respondents across 36 were in general enterprises, and if somebody's interested, I can go through the details on that a little more. 33 were in higher ed, and 33 in K through 12, and it created a nice third sample size. All the respondents had some sort of responsibility for the network and Wi-Fi administration. And the goal of the survey was to investigate and really try and quantify the challenges and trends in Wi-Fi troubleshooting, everything from what are the problems to how much time people spend troubleshooting problems, and what tools they use and things like that. And so we're going to move on to some of the survey data now, but before that, I think Sean's actually going to bring up poll questions here for the audience to let you guys interact with us a little bit more.
Yeah, Zeus, that's exactly what we want to do. So everybody who's participating right now, you're going to see a question pop up. We're actually going to ask you 2 questions for now. We really want to get a sense of your expectations for some of the questions that we're going to be tackling today. This first one, as you can see, the question really is, what % of respondents of the survey found that at least 10% of their end users experience an issue with the Wi-Fi in a typical week. Now, the idea behind this question was to really understand the magnitude of downtime. Right, Zeus, when we've talked often about it impacting productivity. I mean, you just mentioned how applications can impact productivity, but even just overall connectivity or having issues with Wi-Fi, we wanted to get a sense of what that magnitude was. You know, I was really surprised by the findings of this question. What was your take on the information that came back on this particular topic?
Well, you know, then when you look at the number, I understand why you're surprised. You look at the number and go, wow, that was a lot of people. But in a lot of ways, I wasn't, just because sorry, I just lost the go to meeting. But I think Wi-Fi has been something that lots and lots of companies have struggled with, and I think everybody probably on this webinar has experienced the fact that you go to a conference center, you go to an airport, you go to a hotel, and the wireless is poor. In fact, I was talking to the administrator of a school system a little while ago, and you know, he was telling me that often the Wi-Fi goes down and teachers don't say anything and students don't say anything. And when he asked one of the teachers why that was, the person said, well, it's just the way wireless is. And so there's a perception out there, I think, that wireless technology is somewhat unreliable. Obviously, the problems that companies have had with cellular technology have contributed to that, but you know, you're right. I think the number was big, but I wasn't surprised, just because of a lot of the poor best practices around Wi-Fi deployment and things like that.
That's great. And I think you bring up a really interesting point about that perception of Wi-Fi, that we generally perceive it to be unreliable, and so in many cases we don't say anything when it is unreliable, despite the fact that, as you said, it's becoming increasingly more important throughout our entire lives.
Yeah, and in fact, people shouldn't accept that, right? I mean, if you're paying for Wi-Fi at a hotel or something, I mean, there should be some complaints there. Often a lot of organizations aren't even really aware of it.
So we want to ask one other question to the audience before we move on. And now this question, as you see, it will pop up. We wanted to get a sense of the actual problem that is coming up after an end user reports the problem. You know, we all know that the common phrase is the Wi-Fi is crap, but we know that often Wi-Fi isn't always the issue. And in fact, we wanted to ask the question, after diagnosing a Wi-Fi issue, what % of the time is Wi-Fi actually the core problem? And again, what we mean by this is where Wi-Fi issues approach the areas of association and connectivity and even authentication, depending upon the method by which you deployed your network, there are a lot of issues that pop up throughout the connection phase and have really nothing to do with Wi-Fi. They're the systems behind the scenes. So we wanted to find out, where is that barrier? And again, here's an area where, now in my experience, I was not necessarily surprised by this. I know that there's often issues behind the scenes, but Zeus, what was your take on this particular question?
Yeah, you're right. That was another one I wasn't surprised. There's obviously what the user's perceptions are is going to be, I can't access or I can't associate, right? And it'll be very high level, and they're not going to have access to a lot of the details behind it. So again, even with that question, I wasn't shocked by the results. You'd hope they'd be better, obviously. But you know, I think it really underscores the state of Wi-Fi networks and Wi-Fi troubleshooting today.
Excellent. Well, thank you guys for your responses. We'll come back and we'll talk about the answers to the polls as we go through. But for now, we can move on to our topics of conversation. Yeah,
and you'll actually see what the results are, and then we can compare it to what people's perceptions were as we go along. Now, this question, you can see at the bottom there, Q2 and Q3, they're left and right. So Q2 on the left was, when a user reports a network issue, what percentage of the time do they say Wi-Fi as the primary issue? And then Q3 was, in your opinion, how often are users who reported Wi-Fi problems actually experience issues related to primarily the Wi-Fi? So one is, on the left is, what's the perception from the users that it's Wi-Fi, on the right, what's actually the case. And so the red box, or so the light pink box, is over 75% of the time. The purple was between 70 and 75. the orange was between 25 and 50, and then less than 25% of the time was that remaining kind of dark red slice. And so if we combined the over 50, so between 75 and 50 and over 75, that gets us 64% of the time when a user reports an issue, they cite it as Wi-Fi as the primary issue. So basically, the user's having some poor performance, and they just assume 64% of the time that it's the Wi-Fi network. And some users obviously are better than others at being able to troubleshoot that and things, but that's where that is. Now, from an IT perspective, in their opinion, how often do they actually experience problems? Well, it's only 40% of the time. And again, I'm using the majority of the responses there, between 50 and 75 and over 75% of the time. That it's over 40% of the 40% is that number that users are actually experiencing the problem. Although between 25 and 49% of the time is 40%, and so that's still a pretty sizable number. So, you know, the reality is that more often than not, workers are going to think it's Wi-Fi. About half the time, I guess you could say that that's probably correct, although there's probably still some element of that in there. So, but you know, clearly it's the largest cause of connectivity issue when you look at it through the user's eyes, and that's a problem. Next slide. We asked in this question too, and it was in what percentage of your users experience a Wi-Fi problem in a typical week? And so I'm anxious to see what the survey responses were, but here you can see the light blue was more than 20% of workers experience problems in a typical week, and I cut this by enterprise, higher ed, and K through 12 as well. 35% of the respondents said 10 to 20% of their workers have problems weekly, and then you see the number tails off. But that means 40%, 7% of respondents say that at least 10% of their workers have Wi-Fi problems weekly. Now, think about that. That is an enormous number, right? If you have a university with 50,000 students, you're telling 5,000 students, like one of the big massive universities, are having problems every week, or you have a company with 10,000 employees, 1,000 of those employees are experiencing Wi-Fi problems every week. That is a really big number. And in fact, the 12% number that are having problems, where 20% of the employees are having problems every week, is that's something that shouldn't happen. And in fact, in higher ed, that's the highest number where 20% of the users having weekly problems. And in K through 12, of course, you can see just the combination of the pink and blue boxes is 54%. So over half the users in that vertical are having problems, Wi-Fi problems at least weekly. And again, this is this frankly is unacceptable. I don't know another technology where you could say that workers are having 10% of your workers are having problems weekly. It doesn't happen with email. It doesn't happen with cloud services. It's a big number. Next slide.
And actually, before we move on, so if we take a look at the results of our audience poll, actually our audience had a pretty good understanding of this particular issue. So 43% of our audience today said that 50% of respondents likely said that at least 10% of their users have weekly Wi-Fi problems. So there was the largest group of our audience was right in line with the survey results. What we found here too was that 29% felt that only 25% of respondents probably felt this magnitude of issue. And then on the bookends, we had 14% saying both 10% of the respondents indicated this particular issue. But then on the other side, 14% of our audience felt that 75% of respondents likely felt at least 10% of their workforce was having weekly problems. So I think really in line with the findings in the survey, certainly the largest group in our audience feeling that about half of the respondents were likely to feel this particular magnitude.
Yeah, well, that's a little bit surprising, I guess, but it's good to see that the users are, that much in tune, and it actually, in a lot of ways, it validates the accuracy of the survey too, right? That it's a whole other set of sampling that we're doing, and numbers are coming up roughly the same. This question was when a Wi-Fi issue is reported, what do your users say they encounter most frequently? So basically, if they're saying it's Wi-Fi, what is it about the Wi-Fi that's the problem? And the dark blue box are issues with just Wi-Fi associations, just getting on Wi-Fi and associating with that access point. So that's 40%. 23% said it's issues with performance. The green box was just general complaints that Wi-Fi is not working, and I think everybody's heard that before. If you work in IT, I'm sure that you've heard the comment of nothing's working or the internet's not working or something like that. 8% said issues with authentication, and then 7% didn't have a reason. Now, if we look at the right-hand side, the question was is cut by vertical. In K through 12, Wi-Fi association was actually the largest cause of problems by. It was like 25% a bigger problem than in the other two verticals. Performance seemed to be an issue in general enterprise, and I guess I'm not surprised with that. I think schools tend to over-engineer their wireless networks to some degree because the transient population that comes in and out, you think a lot of them are even extended out to stadiums and things like that. So I wasn't that surprised by it. And higher ed, of course, just had general complaints. I don't really have a reason for that, but the range of numbers was roughly the same for these, and so you can see from a vertical perspective how those things broke out. Next slide. Now, in this one, the question was, what tends to be the most common root cause of a user-reported Wi-Fi issue? And so this was, once IT did their troubleshooting, what was the problem? And more than half, so 54% of the reported Wi-Fi issues are actually caused by association, roaming, and related issues. And so we bucketed that into one category, and that's somewhat related to what the actual data was. So again, it's the largest cause, and it was the largest cause from a user perspective. And so that was good to see, I suppose. And then you can see the second largest cause of problems are DNS, and then there's some DHCP and radius issues. There are unforeseen changes because of network change. And actually, one slide I don't have in here is when you do upgrade your operating system, it does, in a lot of cases, it does tend to relate to problems. And so, that's a cause of problem in wired and wireless networking. But by and large, Wi-Fi association, roaming, and related issues were the largest cause of problems. And if you look at it across vertical, that holds true as well. In each of the vertical, that tends to be the biggest problem. And bigger in the two educational verticals versus general enterprise. And again, that makes some sense because you wind up having users that tend to be more transient and going from one building to another, and maybe the Wi-Fi is working on one building and not another, and they're doing different things, and so that made sense to me when I looked at the data cut that way.
Now, before I was going to hop in because the results of our audience poll were actually really interesting, and we had a little bit of a disconnect from the findings of our survey. In fact, 70% of our audience felt that Wi-Fi, being the actual core problem, only occurred 20% of the time.
Huh.
The other 30% felt that it was 50% of the time, which was in line with our survey results, and nobody felt that Wi-Fi actually being the core problem was any higher than 50%.
Oh, well, that was interesting. So maybe that's a bit of a perception reality too, because we're asking the respondents to just off the top of their head understand something without having much time to think about it. But it is interesting to look at that data that way.
Absolutely. And now, before we go on to this, we wanted to ask the audience just one more question as we shift gears and talk a little bit about the Wi-Fi troubleshooting approach. We wanted to ask you about the time it takes to tackle issues. And so the question you see is, how long, on average, do you think the majority of respondents indicated that it takes them to diagnose and resolve Wi-Fi issues? So we're thinking about a particular issue from start to finish. When we combine those efforts together, did you think that the majority of respondents felt that it took less than 30 minutes to do both diagnosis and resolution? Did it take less than an hour? Did it take less than 2 hours? Or was it greater than 2 hours? Did respondents indicate that it took them hours upon hours to both diagnose and resolve Wi-Fi issues? Now, this, I think, is really at the core of solving the challenge. If we can figure out how long it's taking, if we can really understand the impact, so much we talked about with productivity loss as it relates to application, we might also be able to calculate productivity loss as it relates just simply to Wi-Fi downtime.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, if downtime, from what I showed on my slide of how much productivity users lose due to downtime and performance issues, shortening this time would have a very, very big impact on worker productivity. And obviously, from an IT perspective, as I mentioned before, we're moving into this digital era where companies want to move with speed, and if businesses or their IT departments are spending all their time troubleshooting Wi-Fi and other network issues, then of course they're not working on more strategic initiatives. And so it costs the company money, from an IT perspective, which is sort of a direct, obvious cost, but then also there's the implication that users and workers can't do the things they need to do, consumers can't shop, students can't learn, and teachers can't teach, right? And so there's a much bigger implication there.
Absolutely. So we'll visit the results of this last audience poll as we move forward.
All right. So next slide then. And this question was just looking at what's the most common way. So the question was, when a network issue arises, what's the most common way your team becomes aware of it? And so what we're looking for here is users are reporting issues. I think that's 18% of the time. IT observations 26, monitoring is 26, and specific systems are 29. So about 1 out of every 5 problems is reported by the end user, and then there's some sort of IT generated system. I broke it down by vertical as well, and you can see that there wasn't a lot of variable from vertical to vertical. Higher ed seemed to have fewer user-reported issues. Maybe it's because the nature of the students just figuring out something else to do, or tethering off their phone or something like that. And that was the vertical that actually had the highest number of IT observations. And so, it does look like from a notification perspective, network operations is seeing the majority of outages, which is certainly a good thing to see. Next slide. We asked this question just when you are actively troubleshooting Wi-Fi connectivity or performance problems, how often do you rely on packet capture? And again, just getting a sense of the types of tools, and 16% said more than half the time they're relying on packet capture. And that can work if you've got your packet capture tools deployed all over the place. In a lot of cases, you've got to run around with handheld devices to go do that, and that adds to the troubleshooting time. You can see the biggest chunk were the 25 to 50%, and so in every case, in every vertical, the more than 25% of the time, packet capture is used, which is problematic, I guess you could say, just based on how that process is typically done. It tends to be very manual. It requires then some sort of analyzing of the data through a different tool and things. So, but that gives you a sense of how often it's used, and you compare that to what you're doing. Next slide. This question, we're getting some sense of how often you have to troubleshoot issues remotely, and obviously you're not going to have people in your able to troubleshoot things in real time all the time, just because schools close, people go home, and 15% of the respondents said over 3/4 of the time they're troubleshooting problems remotely, which is a pretty big number. And I guess when you think about in most organizations today are distributed, they're becoming increasingly distributed, and so you're not going to have people in branches and things. And of course, schools and higher universities tend to be very, very distributed. And so I think over time we're moving into a world that's becoming increasingly dynamic and increasingly distributed, and we're going to see remote troubleshooting become the norm. So next slide. Here's what we had asked about in the survey. diagnosis and problem resolution. So question 7 on the left side was, when a user reports an issue, how long does it typically take to diagnose? And then on the right is, when a Wi-Fi issue has been properly diagnosed, how long does it take to resolve the issue? And only 6% said it takes them more than an hour to diagnose the issue, but 41% 30 minutes to an hour. So 47% are saying that it takes over 30 minutes to just diagnose a Wi-Fi issue. And then on the resolve side, 41% say it takes over 30 minutes. And so you can, if you add those, that's over an hour, somewhere between an hour to 2 hours of troubleshooting time. About half the audience it takes not long to both diagnose and resolve. And so it, and even the 15 minutes to 29 minutes, I mean, if it's closer to the 29, these are long time periods to go through diagnosing and resolving problems. And again, when you're in an environment where students are trying to learn, or a customer is trying to buy something or something like that, even 15 minutes is a long time. It'll seem like an eternity, right? And so this is something that, if companies are going to invest in Wi-Fi, I know we like to buy the latest and greatest access points. This is where a lot of the investment should be going. And how do I shrink down the time to diagnose and solve problems?
Yeah, Zeus, and that's not just the downtime of the end users, but of course, diagnosis, resolution, these are often manual tasks that take a lot of time up for admins and support staff to dedicate, which means you might need more and more people just to handle the load of calls coming in and issues arising. I wanted to share the findings of our audience poll. Our audience poll felt that there's a little bit of a split. We had 25% of our audience today felt that issues take less than 30 minutes on average to diagnose and resolve. Another 25% felt that diagnosis and resolution took less than an hour, which was pretty in line with the results of our findings. But then 50% of our audience felt that troubleshooting, diagnosis and resolution took less than 2 hours. So no one felt that it took more than 2 hours. No one in our audience today felt that issues could get out of hand so long that we might have hours and hours of time spent resolving and diagnosing. But the majority of our group certainly felt that at least 2 hours, or up to 2 hours, was the average time for diagnosis and resolution.
Now, and think about that. That's on a per incident basis, and we're saying that 10% of the workers, a big chunk of companies have, or a big chunk of respondents said that 10% of the workers have problems weekly. So, I mean, this is a significant amount of time, even if it's only 15 minutes being taken up. Okay, let's look at the next slide. And actually, I think we're going to talk about that right now. So this question is, what percentage of your working time is dedicated to troubleshooting user-reported Wi-Fi issues? And so this is what I was talking about. It's not just a 30 minutes once a day. This is every time a user calls. And so here, more than 13% of the respondents said more than half of their day, their working time, is dedicated to troubleshooting user-reported Wi-Fi issues. Another 45% said 25 to 50%, right? So a quarter to over half your day, for 58% of the audience is spent troubleshooting end-user reported Wi-Fi issues. I mean, think about that. Companies, again, are trying to move faster. They're trying to implement new digital initiatives. They're trying to transform the company. If you read anywhere anything about digital transformation, it'll tell you that these initiatives are IT-led, but time is now spent troubleshooting Wi-Fi issues, and it's a pretty scary number. And again, when I made the comment at the last slide that this is where a lot of the investment needs to be in bringing down the resolution and problem-solving time. This is why there's a huge chunk of engineers that are spending lots and lots of their time troubleshooting Wi-Fi issues. Next slide. And so that's the end of. In fact, if you want to see the complete survey, you can find it on zkresearch.com or on Mojo Networks. There's lots and lots of other questions in there. This was just a snippet of it, and we wanted to get you a flavor of it. And so, from just a final thoughts perspective. Obviously, the Wi-Fi network is mission critical today. It is in almost every vertical. As I mentioned before, performance and outages are costing companies real money. They're taking up way too much of IT's time, and it's taking time away from strategic initiatives. And even from your own career perspective, think about the new skills that you need to learn. Obviously, there's more orchestration going on in networking today, some programmability, and if you're spending all your time just trying to fix the stuff that's broken, then you're not, of course, advancing your own skill set. You're not helping yourself out. You're not helping your company out. So, again, this is when you think about where do I want to invest in Wi-Fi, it's around tools that can help me troubleshoot faster. In fact, excuse me, I think a big problem is that a lot of the tools that network managers use weren't really meant for this era of networking, and I think we need far more automation in Wi-Fi troubleshooting today than most companies have available to them, and this is a bit of a challenge because the vendors in the space I don't think have really kept up, and that's the end of my formal presentation. I want to thank everybody for for following me here. Here's some of my contact information. You can follow me on Twitter. And I know one company that's actually done a good job of trying to solve this problem is Mojo Networks, and I'm going to turn over to Sean, who's just going to talk briefly about what they're doing.
All right, thanks, Zeus. And thank you, everybody, again, for coming today and viewing this particular presentation. Also want to give a thanks to everybody who's watching in the future online somewhere. Just a really brief history of who we are at Mojo Networks. So founded in 2003 as Airtight Networks, we were focused at the time on bringing the best possible system for protecting wireless networks in the form of wireless intrusion prevention. And we still hold on to the most powerful platform for keeping networks secure, keeping the right people on and the wrong people off. And we have customers across the Fortune 500 with a significant focus today in enterprise, in higher education, in K through 12. In fact, we feel we are the first cloud designed specifically for those audiences, designed to bring the enterprise capabilities, the performance, the reliability, and today, the advanced troubleshooting capabilities to these industries that have not had it for so long. And we know this because we're made up of industry veterans. So we come from all over to deliver something better. And what I want to focus on today in the short time before we end is our Mojo Aware. Mojo Aware is a brand new application that we've pushed out to our cloud. It is available today to all of our customers, prospective customers, and it continues to grow. I want to give you a quick look at the architecture of Aware because it's not just an interface. It's not just graphs and charts and some information about what's going on. It really is, from top to bottom, a new way of looking at issues that are persisting throughout the network. And from the bottom up, we start with edge analysis through our intelligent access points. So Mojo is built upon a distributed architecture. We are controller-less, which means our access points are not just boxes with radios inside. They are intelligent devices that are capable of picking up information and making decisions. And because they're in line of every single client interaction, they're able to monitor almost 300 individual KPIs. And their intelligence, their processing power and raw CPU inside allows them to push the relevant details to the cloud to start making decisions immediately upon interacting with the client. And our cloud takes all of that feedback, thousands and thousands, maybe tens of thousands of access points. The cloud has the infinite storage and compute capabilities to take in all that information, to correlate it, and to provide real-time correlation in less than 5 seconds. So this is what's allowing us to really provide a crystal image of what's going on in your network when it's happening. And there we go into the Mojo Aware interface, where we'll spend the rest of our time today deliver dashboards of failures and client health. We're taking a client-first approach by understanding and focusing on how healthy are our clients and what's affecting them. Monitoring and troubleshooting networks is not just about how well our access points are functioning. Are they in a position to produce the signals that they need to handle the bandwidth? We need to understand how clients are interacting, because our network is only as strong as the weakest client. And so Aware allows us to receive immediate feedback and allows us to drive active remediation. As we take a look here, you can see our platform is very complete with a lot of different applications built upon our core services. Today, we focus in on Mojo, where, as I mentioned, it is a client-first approach to Wi-Fi troubleshooting. The goal here is to give you an immediate look at how healthy your network is. Where is the status of our access points? Where are our clients connected? Who is affected by issues? You'll see here that we've picked out the most common issues that often affect clients, from low RSSIs, high reach rates, and even looking at sticky clients, an issue that persists throughout Wi-Fi networks that is very centered on client stability, but is a problem nonetheless. And so we want to highlight and pull out those individuals so that we can see them, focus in on them, find out where they are. And from here, we can dig in. We can really get a sense of what's actually affecting them. Are they connecting? And if they're not, what's the problem? In summation, we can see exactly how successful they are, their average latencies, and we can get even more information about applications they're using, traffic that's running across them, and then the more specific failed associations, so we can really figure out exactly when these issues occurred to give us more information to resolve the issue. And speaking of resolving issues, we're not just talking about Wi-Fi. As our survey found out, Wi-Fi is the core issue about 54% of the time, but that leaves another half of the issues down the stack. Association, authentication, and network combine to give clients issue and prevent them from connecting and getting the performance that they require. And so we are looking at failures up and down the stack, and we're providing this kind of context so that immediately upon logging in, you don't have to diagnose anything. The system has done it automatically. And so when we talk about the time spent diagnosing and resolving issues, let's take diagnosis out of the picture. Let's take a look at Aware and start making directions. Let's point people to the right systems. Let's look at why Radius is providing us with these particular errors. And let's send our network admins on to resolving DHCP and DNS issues. We know these are affecting a large swath of the client population, so we want to make sure that we can do one piece of remediation to affect the largest group of people. And this even allows us to drill in further. We can see who is actually affected by DNS and get a better sense of where these issues persist. What locations are they associated to? What other information can we glean from these devices? Who's still connected, who's failed, and who isn't connected at all? Overall, Aware is designed to provide us with that instant feedback on client health statistics, not just showing us what's happening, but showing us what's wrong, so we can move quickly and effectively, and we can target our remediation to make sure that we are getting exactly what needs to be fixed to have the biggest impact possible. Now, there's more to the Mojo platform as well. For those of you who are longtime fans, you know that we have a long series of webinars, so we've dove deeper into the various aspects of the Mojo platform. If you haven't watched those, check out our YouTube page. You'll see there's a lot of really great information there that you can view. Of course, you can contact us directly to get a one-on-one demo and really get a feel for what exactly the Mojo platform has in store for you. And so with that, I want to thank you again for giving us some time to talk to you about this particular survey and also to see what Mojo Networks is doing to solve the challenges that admins face every day when it comes to Wi-Fi troubleshooting and monitoring. And I want to open the floor at this point to any questions you might have about the topics of conversation today.
Great. Thank you so much, Sean and Zeus, for the presentation today. Again, as Sean mentioned, we'd like to open the floor for any questions people might have. You can use the chat window or the Q&A window on the GoToWebinar panel. Okay, Sean, I have a question here. Do we have any anecdotes or any problems we can share where there was a scenario that required device replacement, statistics around the frequency of device replacement? So I'm wondering if this person is referring to their physical access points that they've needed to replace and upgrade, or what devices they're specifically talking about.
Yeah, I would ask the same piece of clarification. I will comment, though, that at Mojo Networks, we've made the decision that as it relates to access points. Although we have a very high success rate with our access points, and quite frankly, most vendors do, there are those that, through the manufacturing process, have some form of glitch, something that affects them specifically. And so what we've decided here at Mojo Networks is, at the moment it's determined that the access point is at fault, and it's unfixable based off of some first round troubleshooting from the Mojo Network support team, we will immediately send you a new access point next day, and all we ask for you to do with your current access point is toss it in the trash, or we may ask you to send it back on our dime so that we can do some deeper resolution. But we determined that the RMA process is a particular challenge to admins everywhere. It causes you to purchase more access points than you need on the off chance that these issues happen, and it can be a very frustrating process nonetheless. So we have determined that we will send you that new access point next day, no questions asked. Take the current one, toss it in the trash, we'll get you the new one right away. Now, as it relates to clients, that's a tougher situation. There, you want to be vetting the age of the clients. Technology is advancing so fast that in some cases, older devices are being left behind. And in case of Wi-Fi, they can have a really significant impact on the overall performance. I'm still surprised at how many BG clients you see living on the network. They have an impact, and they can really bring down the overall performance and overall available throughput that other clients who are of modern make might enjoy.
Yeah, I'll comment on that too. I think it's, you know, the newer clients are, you do need to service both. And in a lot of ways, you have to be prepared for the old clients that need the older radios, but then the new clients have much better graphics capabilities, like better cameras, people do more video on them, and so typically when you see an upgrade churn like that, you're going to wind up with more multimedia traffic, and that, you know, that again causes different problems on your network. But I would certainly expect the rate of change from the client standpoint to accelerate from here. It's a heavily competitive market.
And I think that's all we have for today. Thank you again, Zeus, for your time and sharing these really insightful results as we look at the future of Wi-Fi troubleshooting. And thank you, Sean. And thank you, everyone, again, for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.